Noise hit first, not sound, impact, metal scraping against metal, creatures shouting in frequencies no human throat could produce, screens flashing prices, warnings, genetic stats. The air itself felt crowded, thick with heat, ozone, and something sweet, almost rotten. The market of Kethra 9 didn't welcome visitors. It overwhelmed them. "Stay close," the handler muttered, not even turning his head. The human nodded. He looked exactly like the kind of person who shouldn't be here. Average height, neutral clothes, no visible enhancements, no weapons, no markings that meant power in any known system, just a man. And yet, he kept walking, past cages filled with snapping, multi-limbed predators, past silent figures floating in containment fields, past creatures that stared back with too many eyes, or none at all. Everything here had value. Everything had a purpose. Everything, except one. He almost missed it. Almost. His steps slowed, then stopped. "Wait," the handler groaned. "Don't start." But the human wasn't listening anymore, because in the middle of all that chaos, there was silence. A small, open space. No crowd, no bidders, no guards watching closely, just a pole, and something chained to it. She sat on the ground, unmoving. Thin, too thin. Her skin had a faint iridescent tone, like oil on water, shifting colors under the harsh artificial lights. Long limbs, folded in tight, like she was trying to disappear into herself. Her head was lowered. Hair, if that's what it was, fell forward in uneven strands, partially hiding her face. No struggle, no sound. Above her, a display flickered lazily. "Unresponsive unit, no functional value." The human frowned. "Unit? Yeah," the handler said flatly. "Means don't bother." The human didn't move. Something felt wrong, not dangerous, not even unusual for this place, just wrong. "She's alive." The handler let out a short laugh. "Technically, sure." That word hung there. Technically. The human stepped closer. No alarms, no reaction. Nobody even looked at him. That alone said everything. In a place where even breathing too close to the wrong species could trigger a bidding war or a fight. This, invisible. He crouched down just outside the length of the chain. Still nothing. Up close, it was clearer. She wasn't just still. She was holding still. There's a difference. Her breathing was shallow, controlled, too controlled, like movement itself had been trained out of her. The human tilted his head slightly. "Hey!" The handler sighed loudly behind him. "Don't do that." No response. The creature didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react. "She doesn't respond," the handler added. "Doesn't eat unless forced, doesn't defend, doesn't communicate, waste of space." The human didn't look away. "Then why keep her here?" "Because someone thought she might be something once," the handler shrugged. "Turns out, she's nothing. Nothing." The word landed heavier than it should. The human leaned forward just a little more, close enough to see her face now. Sharp features, not aggressive, not soft either, just unfinished somehow. Her eyes were open, but empty, not blind, just not there, like she had already left, and her body hadn't caught up yet. "Yeah," the handler said. "Creepy, right?" The human ignored him. There it was again, that feeling. Wrong. Because everything here reacted. Fear, aggression, hunger, even the most broken things reacted. But her, nothing. And somehow, that was louder than all the noise in the market. The human rested his arms on his knees. He didn't reach for her, didn't touch the chain, didn't try to force anything. He just stayed there, looking, waiting. "You're wasting time," the handler warned. "We didn't come here for scrap." Still nothing. A few nearby vendors glanced over, noticed what he was looking at, and lost interest instantly. That told him more than any explanation could. They had all tried, and failed. The human exhaled slowly. Okay. He shifted slightly, lower, closer to her level, not above, not towering, just there. "Hey," he said again, quieter this time. Still no reaction. Seconds passed, long enough for the handler to start turning away. long enough for the noise of the market to swallow the moment again. Then a twitch, small, barely visible, but real. The human's eyes sharpened. "Yeah," he whispered. The handler froze. "Wait, what?" Another movement. Her fingers, just slightly. Like a signal that didn't know if it was allowed to exist. The handler stepped forward. That's just a reflex." But the human didn't answer. Because now, he was sure, she wasn't empty. She was silent. And those weren't the same thing. Slowly, very slowly, her eyes shifted, not fully, not directly, but enough to break the impossible. She looked at him, for the first time, and the entire logic of the market cracked. The handler stared. "That's not possible." The human didn't look away, didn't smile, didn't react at all. He just said, calm and certain, "There you are." And for the first time since anyone could remember, the useless creature had answered. The market didn't change. It still roared, still flashed, still devoured attention like a living thing. But around the pole, something had shifted, not outwardly. No alarms, no crowd gathering, no sudden interest, just a subtle tension, like the air itself had noticed. The handler stepped closer, eyes locked on the chained figure. "Do that again." The human didn't move. She already did. That was a reflex. "No," the human said calmly. "It wasn't." The handler crouched beside him now, studying her with sharper focus. Up close, the details became harder to ignore. The micro-adjustments in her posture, the way her breathing changed, slightly deeper now, and her eyes. They weren't empty anymore. They were avoiding, not staring, not locking on. Avoiding. Like she knew what attention meant, and didn't want it. The handler frowned. "That's new." "Yeah." Silence stretched for a second, then two. Then the handler stood up abruptly. "Doesn't matter." The human glanced up. "Doesn't matter?" "She's still non-functional," he said, brushing dust from his hands. "One twitch doesn't change classification." Above them, the display flickered again. "Unresponsive unit, no functional value." The human looked at it, then back at her. Who decided that?" The handler gave him a look. "Everyone." "That's not an answer." "It is here." The human stood slowly, turning to face the vendor stall nearby. A tall, multi-jointed alien leaned against a console, clearly uninterested. "You're selling her?" the human asked. The vendor didn't even look up at first. "Not selling," it replied. "Discarding." "Same thing. Not here." Now it looked, multiple eyes narrowing slightly. "You want it?" The word hung in the air. "It." The human didn't react outwardly, but something in his posture shifted. "How much?" The vendor let out a dry clicking sound. Amusement, maybe. "You misunderstand," it said. "No one pays for that." The handler crossed his arms. "Told you." The human ignored him. "Then why is she still here?" The vendor tilted its head. "Because removal requires effort." "That's it. That is sufficient reason." The human let that sink in. Not worthless, just not worth the effort. That was worse. He glanced back at her, still sitting, still quiet, but now he could see it clearly. She was listening, not reacting, listening. The human turned back. "So, if I take her," the vendor made a dismissive gesture, "you remove waste. That benefits me. No cost, no return." The handler stepped in quickly. "Hold on." The human didn't look at him. "You're seriously considering this?" "Yes." "Why?" The human paused. That question didn't have a clean answer. Not one that fit this place. "Because she's not what you think." The handler scoffed. "You got that from a finger twitch?" "No," the human said. "From what didn't happen." That made the handler hesitate. "Explain." The human gestured subtly toward the surrounding cages. "Everything here reacts," he said. "Aggression, fear, defense, even broken things push back somehow." The handler nodded slowly. "Yeah, survival instinct." "Exactly." The human looked back at her. "But she doesn't." "So?" "So either she can't," he said quietly, "or she learned not to." That landed differently. The handler's expression tightened. "That's a big assumption." "Yeah," the human agreed. "It is." Silence again. "Then you're still not taking her?" The human looked up. "Why not?" Because you don't know what she is. Neither do you. That's the point. The human held his gaze, then asked, simple and direct, when has that ever stopped humans? The handler exhaled sharply through his nose. You're serious? Yeah. A beat passed, then another. The handler looked at the vendor, then back at the human. Fine. That got the human's attention. But when this goes wrong, the handler added, I'm not stepping in. The human gave a small nod. Fair. The vendor tapped its console lazily. The chain released with a sharp metallic click. No ceremony, no warning. Just done. The restraint around her wrists loosened, fell away. She didn't move. Not immediately. Of course she didn't. The system had changed, but she hadn't caught up yet. The human stepped closer again, slow, measured, no sudden movements. He crouched in front of her once more. You're free, he said. No response. But her breathing shifted again, slightly faster now. Processing. The human didn't reach out, didn't grab her, just placed his hand on the ground between them. Palm open, non-threatening. A choice. You don't have to stay there. The handler watched closely now, more alert than before. Because this wasn't supposed to go anywhere. Seconds passed. The market noise surged around them again, life continuing, uncaring. But here, everything narrowed. Her fingers twitched again, stronger this time, then stopped. Then, slowly, painfully slowly, she moved. Not much, just enough to shift her weight, to lift her head slightly higher, to look at the space in front of her, at his hand, not touching, not reaching, just there. The human didn't move. Didn't breathe too loudly, didn't rush it, because he understood something no one else here seemed to. You don't force something that learned to disappear. You wait for it to come back. Another second, then another. Then her hand moved, barely, hovering just above the ground, shaking, unstable, like the act itself was unfamiliar. The handler whispered under his breath, "That's not normal." No, it wasn't, and that was the point. Her fingers lowered, closer, closer, then stopped, right before contact. The human didn't react, didn't push, didn't close the gap. He left it there, unfinished, a choice she had to make. And for the first time since she had been placed in that market, she hesitated, not out of fear, but because she could. And that changed everything. Her fingers touched his hand, light, uncertain, real. The handler froze. The vendor actually leaned forward, because now it wasn't a reflex, now it was a decision. The human exhaled quietly. Yeah, he murmured. And in that small, fragile moment, the worthless unit made her second impossible move. She chose. The moment her fingers touched his hand, everything should have reset. That's how conditioning works. Stimulus, response, correction, pain if necessary, silence always. But nothing came, no shock, no restraint tightening, no voice commanding her back into stillness, just contact, warm, steady, unfamiliar. She froze, not like before. Before she had been empty, now she was thinking. The human didn't move, didn't grip her hand, didn't react like he had just achieved something impossible. He just let it happen, let her decide what it meant. Behind him, the handler spoke under his breath. "This is wrong." The human didn't look back. "Yeah, I mean it," the handler insisted. "You don't understand what kind of behavioral break this is." "I do." "No, you don't," the handler snapped quietly. "If something was trained out of her, it stays out. That's the whole point." A pause. Then the human said, calm and simple, "Not always." That answer didn't satisfy him, but it stopped him from speaking again, because now even he could see it. She wasn't pulling away. She wasn't collapsing back into stillness. She was holding on, lightly, barely, but intentionally. The human shifted slightly, lowering himself more comfortably to the ground. Still at her level, still not above her. "You don't have to rush," he said softly. Her fingers tightened, just a fraction. But it was there, a reaction to words. Not force, not command, words. The handler's eyes widened slightly. "She's tracking language. Looks like it. That's not in her classification." The human almost smiled. Yeah, I figured. A nearby vendor glanced over again, then didn't look away this time. Something had changed, not enough for a crowd, but enough to break the pattern. The invisible had become noticeable. The human tilted his head slightly. "Can you understand me?" No response. Not verbally, but her grip shifted again. Subtle, different, like she was trying to answer with something she did have. "Okay," he said. "We'll work with that." The handler shook his head slowly. "This is escalating faster than I like. Relax." "I am relaxed," he replied. "This is me relaxed while watching something impossible happen." "Fair." The human focused back on her. Her eyes were no longer drifting. They weren't fully locked on him either, but they returned. Again and again. Like she kept checking if he was still there, like disappearance was still the default expectation. "You're not used to this, are you?" he asked quietly. That word again. Used to. Her fingers flinched, not away from him, but at the word itself. Memory. Trigger. Something buried. The human noticed instantly. "Hey," he said gently. "No pressure. Just talking." Her breathing changed. Shallow again. Controlled. The old pattern trying to take over. The handler leaned in slightly. "You hit something." "Yeah. You should stop." The human shook his head slowly. "No. I just need to adjust." He shifted his tone. Softer. Less direct. "You don't have to do anything," he said. "You're already doing enough." That landed differently. Her breathing eased. Just slightly. But enough. The handler exhaled. "Okay. That's new." Yeah, it was. The human glanced at the discarded chain near her feet, then back at her. "Do you know you're not restrained anymore?" No response. But her eyes flickered downward, toward the chain, then back up. That alone answered the question. "She knows," the handler murmured. "Yeah. Then why isn't she moving?" The human didn't answer immediately. "Because he already knew. Because she hasn't been allowed to," he said finally. The handler went quiet. That explanation felt too simple, but nothing else fit. The human slowly pulled his hand back a few centimeters, not breaking contact completely, just enough to create space. Her fingers followed instinctively, then stopped, like she caught herself, like following wasn't allowed either. There it was again. Control, not from outside, from inside. The human lowered his voice. "You're allowed to move." Nothing. No reaction. But that didn't surprise him. Words alone wouldn't undo something like this. So he did something else. He stood up, slowly, carefully, not sudden, not threatening, just rising. Her eyes followed him instantly, faster than before, more focused. That alone told him everything. She was aware, fully aware, just restricted by something deeper than chains. The human took one step back, creating distance, then extended his hand again. Not closed this time, not within easy reach. An invitation, not support. "If you want," he said simply. The handler frowned. "You're making her choose again." "Yeah, that's risky." "I know, because choice was the one thing she wasn't supposed to have. And now, he was offering it twice." Her body tensed. Not in fear, in conflict, move, nor stay, reach, or freeze. For a moment, nothing happened. The old pattern held. Stillness, silence, obedience. Then a shift, tiny, but real. Her weight moved. Barely. Her muscles reacted like they hadn't been used in too long. Unstable, uncertain. The handler whispered, "No way." Her hand lifted, higher than before, shaking more now, because this wasn't a reflex, this wasn't a reaction, this was effort. The human didn't move, didn't help, didn't close the distance. He just waited, because this part mattered. Her fingers stretched forward, slow, painfully slow. Every centimeter looked like a struggle against something invisible, something internal. Then she stopped, right at the edge of what she could do before. Her hand trembled violently now, like something inside her was screaming to stop, to go back, to disappear again. The handler held his breath. She can't. The human didn't agree, didn't disagree. He just said, calm and steady, "You can stop if you want." That wasn't what anyone expected, not encouragement, not pressure, permission, to stop, to fail, to not perform. And that broke something. Not her, the barrier. Her hand moved again, past the limit, past the point where she had stopped before, further, closer, closer, until she grabbed his hand, not lightly this time, firm, certain, present. The handler stepped back instinctively. Okay, that's not just behavior. No, the human said quietly, it's not. Because now, it wasn't about response anymore. It was about will. She looked up at him fully for the first time. No drifting, no avoidance, direct, focused, there. And in that moment, she broke the first real rule, not silence, not stillness, something deeper. She chose to act without being told. And that wasn't defective. That was dangerous. The grip didn't loosen. If anything, it stabilized. Her hand stopped shaking. Not completely, but enough to show control. That alone changed the situation, because instability could be dismissed. Control couldn't. The handler stepped back again, eyes scanning the surroundings. We need to move. The human didn't look away from her. Why? Because people are starting to notice. He wasn't wrong. Across the market, attention had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly. Heads turning, eyes lingering longer than before. Patterns breaking. And in a place like this, pattern breaks meant value or danger. Sometimes both. The vendor who had dismissed her earlier was now fully watching, all of its eyes focused, calculating, re-evaluating. You said she had no value, the human called out. The vendor didn't answer immediately. Then, assessment may require revision. Of course it did. The human exhaled slowly. Too late. The handler moved closer. He's right about one thing. The human finally glanced at him. This place doesn't ignore things that suddenly become interesting. Define interesting. The handler nodded toward her. That. Fair. The human looked back at her. She was still holding his hand, still present, still watching him. But now, there was something else. Tension. Not fear. Anticipation. Like she felt the shift too. Like she understood what attention meant here. You feel it, don't you? He murmured. Her fingers tightened. That was answer enough. The handler lowered his voice. We leave. Now. The human hesitated. Not because he disagreed, but because leaving wasn't simple. Not anymore. She can walk? The handler asked. I don't know. Great. The human crouched slightly again, bringing himself closer to her level. Can you stand? No immediate response, but her eyes flickered downward. Processing. He didn't rush her, didn't repeat the command, just waited, because he was starting to understand the pattern. Force slowed her down. Choice moved her forward. And if you want to leave, he added. That word again. Want. Another pause. Then, movement. Slow. Unstable. Her free hand pressed against the ground. Her body shifted, muscles reacting like they had been dormant too long. The handler muttered, She's never been mobile in record. Well, the human said quietly, records were wrong. She pushed, failed, stopped, not collapse. Pause, adjustment. The human didn't help, didn't grab her, didn't lift her, because that would undo everything. Instead, he stayed still, present, an anchor. She tried again. This time, her knee bent under her, shaking, uncertain, but holding. The handler scanned the perimeter again. We're running out of time. The human ignored him. Take your time, he said softly. That seemed like the worst possible advice here. And yet, it worked. She rose, slowly, unsteadily, but fully, standing, for the first time in who knew how long, around them. That subtle attention spike sharpened. Now it was visible. A few figures stopped completely. Others pretended not to look, but clearly were. The vendor straightened. Interesting. Yeah, very. The handler stepped closer again, voice tight now. That's enough. We go. The human nodded once, then looked at her. You ready? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to because she didn't sit back down. She stayed upright. That was answer enough. The human turned slightly, guiding direction, not pulling. Stay close. They took one step. She followed. Barely, unsteady but intentional. Another step, still with him. The handler moved ahead slightly, clearing a path. "Don't stop," he said under his breath, not planning to. But the market wasn't passive anymore. A figure stepped into their path, tall, armored, not subtle. "Transaction incomplete," it said flatly. The handler sighed. "Here we go." The human stopped, not backing down. "Not a transaction," he replied. "Removal requires authorization." The vendor's voice echoed from behind them. "Authorization revoked." The human didn't turn. Of course it changed. The handler leaned in slightly. "Told you?" The armored figure stepped closer. "Unit is now under re-evaluation." There it was. Value. Too late. The human's expression didn't change. "She's not a unit." Silence. Then a slight shift in tone. "Classification pending. She's leaving. That is not permitted." The tension snapped tighter. Around them, the watchers weren't hiding it anymore. Because now, this wasn't curiosity. This was escalation. The handler whispered, "You're about to cause a problem." The human answered calmly, "Already did." The armored figure reached forward, fast, precise, targeting her, not him. And that was the mistake, because this time she didn't freeze. Her grip on the human's hand tightened instantly, not passive, not reactive, intentional. The moment the armored figure got too close, something changed, not visibly, not dramatically, but undeniably. The air shifted, pressure, subtle but real. The handler stiffened. "You feel that?" "Yeah." The armored figure slowed, just slightly, like movement itself became heavier, more difficult. "Unregistered response," it stated. No one answered, because now all attention was locked on her. She stepped forward, one step, still unsteady, but deliberate, placing herself between the human and the threat. The handler's eyes widened. "Yeah," the human said quietly. "I know." The armored figure recalculated, then tried again, this time faster, more force, and that's when it happened. Her head lifted fully, eyes locking forward, focused, sharp, present, and the pressure spiked hard. The armored figure stopped mid-motion, not by choice. Something held it, invisible, crushing, restricting, its limbs strained, servos whining, system alerts flickering across its armor. Interference detected, then silence, stillness, complete. The entire market felt it now. That shift, that undeniable presence. The handler took a slow step back. "She's not defective." "No," the human said. "She's not." The armored figure dropped to one knee, not from damage, from force, from something it couldn't fight. And in the middle of it all, she stood there, breathing steady now, eyes locked forward, no hesitation, no emptiness, just control. The vendor whispered from behind. That was suppressed. The human didn't turn. "Yeah," he said. "I figured." Because now the truth was obvious. She wasn't useless. She wasn't broken. She was contained. And whatever had been holding her down was starting to fail. The pressure didn't fade. It deepened. What had started as a subtle weight in the air now pressed down on everything. Metal, flesh, energy. The market didn't go silent this time. It choked. Voices cut off mid-sentence. Displays flickered, distorted. Creatures that thrived in chaos suddenly froze, instincts clashing with something they couldn't understand. The armored figure remained on one knee, locked, not damaged, overridden. "That's not possible," the handler whispered. The human didn't answer, because he was watching her, really watching her now. Her posture had changed, no longer folded inward, no longer trying to disappear. She stood straight, not perfectly balanced, but stable enough. And her eyes, they weren't just aware anymore. They were focused, intentional, dangerous, the kind of focus that didn't ask questions, the kind that decided outcomes. "Unregistered force detected," the armored figure repeated, voice strained now. "Escalating." It never finished, because the pressure spiked again, sharper, targeted. The metal around its joints groaned under invisible strain. The handler took another step back. Okay. This is bad. The human finally spoke. Only if someone keeps pushing. That was the problem. Someone always pushed. From behind them, the vendor's voice came again, no longer lazy, now controlled. Contain the unit. Plural footsteps answered. Heavy, coordinated, multiple enforcers moving in. Not curious, not cautious. Decisive. The handler exhaled slowly. Yeah, here it is. The human didn't move, didn't run, didn't even turn. Because running now would confirm everything they were thinking. Value, threat, asset. Instead, he did the one thing no one else here would do. He spoke to her. Soft, steady. You don't have to fight. That shouldn't have worked. Not in this situation, not with enforcers closing in, not with the entire market watching. But her reaction was immediate. The pressure didn't disappear, but it changed, shifted, from expansion to control, focused, directed, like a blade instead of a storm. The handler blinked. You're guiding her. No, the human said quietly. I'm reminding her. Of what? He didn't answer right away. Because the answer was happening in front of them. The enforcers advanced, weapons raised, systems active. They didn't hesitate, didn't question, didn't care what she was, only what she represented, instability. And instability had to be removed. The first one lunged, fast, precise, calculated to disable, not destroy. It never reached her. Mid-step, it stopped, just like the first one, frozen. But this time, it wasn't just pressure, it was direction. The force twisted, slightly, enough. The enforcer's body turned sideways mid-air and slammed into the ground. Hard, not thrown, placed, controlled impact. The handler stared. That's precision. The human nodded slightly. Yeah. More enforcers moved in, faster now, adjusting, adapting. But they were already too late, because she wasn't reacting anymore. She was predicting. Each movement toward her met resistance before it completed. Each attack collapsed before it formed. One by one, they dropped, not destroyed, not even heavily damaged, just neutralized, like pieces removed from a board, clean, efficient, impossible. The market pulled back, physically, space opening around them. No one wanted to be close anymore, not even the ones who thought they understood power. Because this wasn't aggression, it was control on a level they didn't recognize. The handler shook his head slowly. She's rewriting the engagement. The human's eyes stayed on her. She's choosing how it ends. And that was the difference. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't losing control. She was deciding. The last enforcer hesitated, just for a second. That was all it took. The pressure shifted again, focused entirely on it. It dropped its weapon, not by force, by failure. Systems shutting down under something they couldn't resist. Silence followed. Real silence this time. Heavy, absolute, no movement, no sound. Just her, standing there, breathing steady, eyes scanning, aware of everything, in control of everything. The handler exhaled slowly. Okay. That's new. The human finally stepped forward, slow, careful, because now the situation had flipped. She wasn't the one catching up anymore. The world was catching up to her. He stopped beside her, close, but not touching. You're okay, he said. Her eyes flicked toward him instantly. That focus shifted, softened, not gone, just different. The pressure in the air eased, not fully, but enough to breathe again. The handler noticed immediately. She's stabilizing around you. Yeah, that's not normal? No, the human agreed. It's not. From across the open space, the vendor spoke again. This time, careful. Human. No arrogance, no dismissal, just calculation. You will release the asset. The human didn't even turn. No. A pause, then. That is not a request. I know. The tension snapped tight again, not from her this time, from everything else, because now this wasn't about misunderstanding. This was about control, and they had just lost it. The vendor took a step forward, then stopped, because her gaze shifted again, locked onto it, and for the first time, It hesitated, not out of strategy, out of instinct. The handler let out a quiet breath. They're scared. Yeah, the human said. They should be, because now the truth was undeniable. They hadn't misjudged her. They had suppressed her, labeled her, ignored her, and left her in chains, because that was the only way she fit into their system. But now she wasn't contained, and she wasn't silent. She stood beside the human, not behind him, not below him, beside. And that changed everything. The human glanced at her one more time. You ready to leave? A pause. Then a small nod. Clear, intentional, choice. The handler exhaled sharply. That's our cue. They turned, started walking. No one stopped them. No one dared. Because behind them, the enforcers were still down, the systems were still unstable, and the air still remembered what she could do. Step by step, they moved through the market, and for the first time since entering, nothing tried to touch them. Not out of respect, not out of rules, but out of something much simpler, fear. And at the center of it all, the one they called useless, had just taken control of the entire board. They didn't run. That was the first thing that felt wrong. In a place like Kethra 9, you ran when things broke. You disappeared, you survived. But the human, he walked, steady, measured, unhurried, and she walked with him. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but each step was real, intentional, owned. The handler stayed slightly ahead, scanning every angle. This is the part where something worse shows up, he muttered. The human didn't disagree. Probably. Behind them, the market was still recovering, systems rebooting, voices returning in fragments, creatures whispering in tones that didn't carry far, but carried enough. Word was spreading, fast, too fast. They're not going to let this go, the handler said. No, the human replied. They're not. Then why aren't we moving faster? The human glanced slightly to the side, at her. She's still learning to walk. That answer landed heavier than it should, because it wasn't weakness. It was timing. You don't rush something that just broke free. Even now, her steps were stabilizing, each one less uncertain than the last, each movement more controlled, more natural, like her body was remembering something it was always supposed to do, but never allowed. You're adapting fast, the human said quietly. She didn't answer, not with words. But her pace adjusted, matched his, closer, aligned. The handler noticed. She's syncing with you. Yeah, that's not just behavior. No, the human said. It's trust. That word again. Trust. In the place where nothing existed without value, that concept didn't fit, and that made it dangerous. Ahead, the exit corridor came into view. Wide, metallic, guarded. Of course it was. Two figures stood at the threshold. Not like the enforcers. These didn't move, didn't posture, didn't react to the chaos behind. They just stood there, waiting. There it is, the handler murmured. The human slowed slightly, not stopping, just adjusting, because this wasn't going to be simple. It never was. As they approached, one of the figures spoke, voice calm, measured. You will stop. The human didn't. Already tried that today, he replied. The second figure stepped forward, slightly, enough to block the path completely. You are leaving with unauthorized property. The human's gaze didn't shift. She's not property. Classification disagrees. Then your classification is wrong. A pause, the kind that usually came before escalation. The handler leaned closer. These aren't market guards. I know. They don't miss. I know. Then maybe. No, that ended that. The human kept walking, closer, step by step. No aggression, no fear, just forward. The figures didn't move, didn't attack, not yet, because they were calculating, and that gave him something, time. You don't have to do anything, the human said softly without looking at her. Her step slowed slightly, then stabilized again. Listening, the first figure spoke again. Release the entity. No. You are escalating beyond your capacity. Wouldn't be the first time. That answer didn't provoke. It confused, because confidence without visible power didn't fit their models. and that was his advantage. Behind him, the air shifted again, subtle, controlled. The handler felt it immediately. She's ready. Yeah, but the human didn't stop, didn't step back, didn't signal attack. He just kept moving forward until he was close enough to see the fine details in their armor. Close enough to be within striking range, close enough to be vulnerable, and still, he didn't stop. The figures reacted. Finally, energy built along their arms, weapons activating, precise, lethal, calculated to end the situation instantly. The handler tensed. Here we go. Wait, the human said. One word. Calm. Certain. And somehow, that was enough. Not for the guards. For her. The pressure didn't explode, didn't spike. It condensed. Tighter. Sharper. Invisible lines forming in the space around them. The guards moved, fast, faster than the enforcers had. But speed didn't matter. Not anymore. Because before they reached him, they slowed. Not stopped instantly, but resisted, like moving through something thick, something that pushed back. Harder with every centimeter. The human didn't move, didn't even flinch, because he knew this wasn't about reaction anymore. This was control. The first guard tried to push through, systems compensating. Power increasing, wrong move. The pressure responded, adjusted, focused, its arm twisted slightly off trajectory, just enough. The attack missed. Clean. The second guard recalculated mid-motion, changed angle, changed speed. Better. Still not enough. Because she wasn't following them anymore. She was ahead of them. Every move they made met something already there, already waiting, already stopping it. The handler whispered, "She's not reacting." "Yeah," the human said quietly. "She's deciding." That was the difference, and it terrified them. The first guard dropped to one knee, not from impact, from resistance. The second followed. Moments later, weapons dimming, systems failing under something they couldn't quantify. Silence. Again. Heavy. Absolute. The path to the exit. Clear. The human stepped forward, past them. No hesitation, no acknowledgement, because they weren't the threat anymore. They were the proof. Proof that the system didn't understand what it was dealing with. He crossed the threshold, into the corridor beyond. The handler followed quickly. "I don't like how easy that was." "It wasn't easy," the human said. He glanced back slightly. At her. She stood just inside the exit now. Still, looking back at the market, at the place that had defined her as nothing. For a long moment, she didn't move. The handler frowned. "We need to go." The human didn't rush her. Didn't call out, didn't pull. He just waited, because this moment mattered. More than the fight, more than the escape. This was choice. Again, behind her. The market shifted, still watching, still afraid, still trying to understand what had just happened. In front of her, freedom, unknown, unstructured, uncontrolled. For the first time, no one was deciding for her. The human spoke softly. "You don't owe that place anything." Her fingers moved slightly. Then she turned, fully, away from the market, away from the past, and stepped forward, crossing the threshold. The handler exhaled. "That's it?" The human shook his head slightly. "No." He looked ahead, into the corridor, where the lights dimmed, where the structure changed, where something else waited. That was just the part they understood. The handler frowned. And the part they didn't? The human's voice stayed calm, steady, certain. That's what comes next. Because the truth was finally clear. They hadn't failed to measure her power. They had failed to measure something far more dangerous, the reason she chose not to use it. And now she was choosing. The corridor was quiet, not empty, just controlled. Lights dimmed along the walls in slow pulses. The noise of the market faded behind them, replaced by something tighter, cleaner, more intentional. This wasn't a place for chaos. This was where decisions were enforced. The handler slowed slightly. "I don't like this part." The human kept walking. "You didn't like the last part either." "Yeah, but that was loud. This..." He glanced around. "This is organized." Worse, way worse. Behind them, she followed. her steps now steadier than before, not perfect but no longer uncertain. She wasn't learning to walk anymore, she was choosing where to go. That was the difference. The human glanced back briefly. She was watching everything. Not overwhelmed, not distant, present, absorbing, adapting. "You're doing fine," he said. No response. But her pace adjusted again, closer, aligned. The handler noticed. "She's locking onto you?" "Yeah, that's not normal." The human exhaled lightly. "You keep saying that, because it keeps getting worse." "Fair." Ahead, the corridor opened into a larger chamber. Circular, minimal, no clutter, just structure, and at the center, a single figure. Not armored, not imposing, but still, completely still. "That's not security," the handler whispered. "No," the human said. "It's something else." And the figure spoke before they got closer. Voice calm, measured, old. "You should not have taken her." The human didn't stop. Too late. "You misunderstand what she is." "Yeah," he replied. "I heard that before." "That is because you are repeating a mistake." Now he slowed, not out of fear, out of interest. "Then explain it better." A pause. Then, "She was not discarded because she is useless." The handler crossed his arms. "No kidding. She was contained because she is incompatible." The human's eyes narrowed slightly. "With what?" The figure answered without hesitation. "Control." Silence. That word settled deep. Not power, not danger. Control. The human glanced back at her. She was watching the figure now, not reacting, not attacking, just observing. "You tried to control her," he said. "Yes. And?" "We failed." That part wasn't surprising. "What happens when you fail?" the human asked. The figure tilted its head slightly. "We remove variables." The handler muttered. "Of course you do." The human's voice stayed calm. "And you couldn't remove her?" "No." "Why?" Another pause, then, "Because she does not respond to force." The human almost smiled. "Yeah, I noticed. She does not respond to logic structures." Also noticed. "She does not respond to hierarchy." The handler blinked. "That's a problem." "Yes," the figure said. "It is." The human looked at her again, then back. "So what does she respond to?" That was the question. The real one. The one everything had been building toward. The figure didn't answer immediately because now it was observing him. "You already know." The human didn't speak, didn't need to, because the answer was standing right behind him. Choice. Not command, not pressure. Choice. "She responds to intent," the figure continued. "Unstructured, unpredictable, non-optimized." The handler frowned. "That sounds like a flaw." The human shook his head slightly. "No," he looked at her. "That sounds human." Silence filled the chamber, because that connection, that was the piece no one else had made. The figure spoke again. "That is why you are dangerous." The human raised an eyebrow. "Me?" "Yes." "Because I talked to her?" "No." A slight shift in tone, more precise now. "Because you did not try to control the outcome." That landed. Hard. Because it was true. Every system here, every species, every structure relied on control, prediction, optimization. But him? He hadn't tried to make her respond. He had just allowed it. And that broke everything. The handler exhaled slowly. "You're telling me the whole system failed because he didn't push?" "Yes." "That's insane." "Yes." The human looked at the figure. "So what now?" The answer came instantly. "You will leave." The handler blinked. "Wait. What?" The human didn't react. "You're letting us go." "Yes." "Why?" The figure's gaze shifted slightly. Toward her. "Because containment has already failed." A beat. Then. "And because forcing the outcome again would escalate beyond acceptable limits." Translation. They were afraid, not of her power alone, but of what happened when that power had a reason. The human nodded once. "Fair." The handler looked between them. "That's it? No fight? No chase?" The human turned slightly. "Not everything needs to end that way." They started moving again, toward the far exit of the chamber. No one stopped them. No alarms, no resistance, just passage. Halfway through, the human slowed, just slightly. then spoke, not to the figure, to her. "You didn't have to help me back there." She didn't answer immediately. Of course she didn't. But this time, there was no emptiness in the silence, just processing. Then a single word, quiet, rough, unused, but clear. "You." The handler froze. "Did she just—" "Yeah," the human said softly. "I heard it." He looked back at her, not surprised, not shocked, just understanding. "You chose." A pause. Then she spoke again, stronger this time, still simple. "You stayed." That was it. That was the reason, not strength, not power, not strategy. He stayed. When everyone else walked away, when everyone else decided she wasn't worth the effort, he stayed. And in a universe built on value, that was the one thing no one else offered. The human gave a small nod. Yeah. They reached the final exit. Light spilling in from beyond. Open space. Unknown territory. Freedom. The handler stepped through first, shaking his head. "I'm never coming back here." "Good plan." The human stepped forward, then paused, just long enough to glance back one last time. The chamber. The figure. The system that tried to define everything. Then he walked out. She followed, not behind him, not led, beside him. And as the doors closed behind them, one truth became impossible to ignore. They didn't just lose control of her. They revealed something far worse. Something the entire galaxy had underestimated. Humans didn't dominate because they were the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest. They dominated because they saw value where no one else even looked. And sometimes that was enough to change everything. And if you're human, subscribe, leave your like, and comment below. Humanity stands.